stone, brick, steel, glass, and concrete. Architecture is often described as the art of space. But in reality, architecture has always been shaped by something more fundamental: materials. Each time a new material appears or an existing one is reinvented, it doesn't just change how we build. It changes what architecture can become. New materials alter possibilities, redefine beauty, and often completely change the architectural trends. So if we want to understand why buildings look the way they do today, we have to ask a deeper question. How did materials shape the evolution of architecture? I am Kinnard from Spectrum, and let's talk about the materials that changed architecture. For most of human history, architecture was defined by stone and timber. Stone was strong in compression but weak in tension, and this factor affected the way structures were built. Egyptian pyramids, ziggurats, and Greek temples, they all relied on mass and gravity. Architecture during this period was about grandeur and monumentality. But the materials forced some limitations. Openings are small, walls had to be thick, columns were massive. During this time, architecture wasn't just an artistic expression. It was a direct consequence of material physics. As cities expanded, architects began using brick and masonry more extensively. Brick offered more flexibility. It could be produced in large quantities and assembled into complex geometries. The material that made some of the most important structural innovation in history: the arc, the vault, the dome. Roman architecture is a prime example. They pushed brick and concrete systems to extraordinary limits. The Pantheon have the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, demonstrating how materials could create vast interior spaces, previously impossible with traditional stone construction. Here, we begin to see a pattern. Whenever materials evolve, architects expand its ambitions. During the Middle Age, architects were pushing stone construction to its absolute limits. Gothic architecture introduced a series of structural innovations: pointed arches, ribbed vaults, flying buttresses. These systems distributed loads in new ways, which allowed walls to become thinner and the structures to rise higher. But this was not simply stylistic. It was a revolution driven by material engineering. For the first time in history, architecture wasn't heavy and monumental. It became vertical and luminous. But even Gothic builders were constrained by the same material. Stone can only go so far, and eventually, architecture needs something new. The Industrial Revolution introduced materials that significantly changed architecture. Iron and steel had different structural properties. Unlike stone, steel performs well in both compression and tension. This allowed lighter structural frames, longer spans, and taller buildings. The first architectural experiments appeared in the 19th century, with train stations, exhibition halls, and industrial buildings. The Crystal Palace in 1851 was enormous, light, and transparent, a masterpiece built almost entirely from iron and glass. But the real evolution came after. Steel frames made something possible that had never existed before: skyscraper. Cities were suddenly shaded by the colossal towers that stand as tall as no one could ever imagine. Architecture shifted from massive and heavy to light and skeletal. Here, architecture wasn't just expanding, it started transforming. If steel enables height, reinforced concrete enables freedom. Concrete had existed for centuries, but when steel reinforcement was added, it became one of the most powerful building materials ever invented. Reinforced concrete could resist both compression and tension. This means that architects were no longer trapped by structural walls. Columns could now carry the weight of the building. Walls could become more flexible. This is where modern architecture truly begins. Le Corbusier, a famous architect that introduced 5 points of modern architecture. Pilotis, referring to the reinforced concrete columns. Free plan, which refers to the open floor plan concept. Free facade, where exterior walls do not need any support. Horizontal windows, strips of glass running across the facade, providing natural lighting. And lastly, roof garden, which are flat roofs that are converted into outdoor functional spaces. All of this was made possible by reinforced concrete. All of a sudden, architecture became minimal, geometric, and abstract. Not because architects suddenly changed their taste, but because the materials allowed it. Glass. Buildings no longer needed facades. They could become entirely transparent. Less is more. These were the words of the famous architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. But they were not just philosophical, but material. Glass and steel allowed architecture to become sleek, minimal, and light. Today, architecture still continues to evolve. New materials are emerging everywhere, with the new Bauhaus movement prioritizing sustainability, carbon reduction, and living systems. Materials and systems, cross-laminated timber, self-healing concrete, and smart dynamic facades. For the first time in history, materials are not only structural elements, they are also environmental systems. Materials that react to environmental changes, such as light and heat. When we look back at architectural history, we often talk about styles: classical, Gothic, modern. But if you look closer, you'll see something else driving those changes. Materials. Stone created monuments. Steel created skyscrapers. Concrete created modernism. The materials we develop today will define the architecture of tomorrow. Because architecture doesn't evolve randomly. It evolves when materials turn possibilities into reality.